So I have all the sections built. So on each side there's a short one on the front like this, and then there's a mid-size one like this, because there's an opening there where the kiosk goes, which I haven't built yet either because it would have got broken. And then there's this long section that runs down the approach. So I feel pretty good about these. They turned out good. Now what you might want to do is just double check them all. Like I went over them all several times, had to re-glue a few spots, make a few adjustments. But it's easy to do with, you know, with the solvent, right? And the plastic, you can take a knife and pop apart, and it's super strong. So I'm really pleased with those. Now, before I paint these, oh, and if you've noticed, why does he have nuts on the side of the beam here? Well, because on one side, there's this rectangle conduit pipe that runs all the way down to the little yard office at the beginning of the approach, right? That houses all the electrical cables that go to the hydraulic towers and so on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a piece of 3.5 millimeter automotive strip tape, which is this stuff here, which is a lot cheaper than hobby tape that I buy at an automotive store, 3.5 mil wide. And I use this for bulk work. I don't want to use my nice Tamiya thin line tape for this stuff unless I'm doing a locomotive or rolling stock or whatever. So I want to cover this up because I'm going to paint these and weather these. And in the same manner, I ran this tape along the edge of the barge ramp before I painted it. So it lays down on the barge ramp. So now that it's painted, I just peel that tape off. I got white exposed plastic. And then I'll do the same here, peel the tape off here. And then I'll just glue it down and get a nice bond integrity, right? Okay, and if there's any little anomalies or unpainted line or anything that shows, I can touch that up with the airbrush, traditional brush, or a wash or whatever. Okay, so those are all ready for paint. Okay, time to have some fun. So I'm going to paint these railings now. If you're using a regular compressor like I like to use, like a little contractor 2-horse that goes up to 90 psi, which is what you need for an airbrush, and you find that your airbrush is starting to underperform, check that you turned it on. A lot of times I'll turn it off just for the sake of video, and I'm wondering, hey man, my airbrush is not performing. So I got to go off camera and turn it on because it's not super noisy, but you know, the newer ones are pretty good. But boy, do they ever perform good. Okay, so the railings are all painted, as you can see. Actually, they're a little more work than you realize. Getting inside the H columns, getting all those surfaces covered is, you know, it's a little bit of work with the airbrush. You're not going to be very successful with a traditional brush, though, if you're going to paint detailed railings like this, for a couple of reasons. How are you going to paint the inside of the H column risers or posts? Are you just going to kill all the detail, right? The paint, like, there's no way. The paint will build up, and you're going to lose all the sharpness of all that nice modeling that you did. You know, so it's good luck with that, right? Like painting detail parts like that and maintaining a crispness for scale. But anyway, that's one of the advantages of the airbrush. So after this, I'm going to get the grays. I'll show you that in close, how I'm going to pick those poles out and weather the rails down a bit. And we'll call it a wrap on the railings pretty soon. Pretty soon. Okay, so I'm going to just get a little bit going here on the paper, just to kind of get into the groove here. I'll try to get this so you can see it. Now I don't want to paint, I'm not painting the sides of the stanchion because I want to leave that, because I'll let the paint fall where it may. And don't worry too much about overspray on the top plank rail, because that can get chased later. So what I'm going to do is start a little bit on the side there, and then I'm just going to bring it on really slow and just cut it in like that. See? See the little bit of overspray? That's okay. If it gets a bit sticky, the paint, like it won't pop through at a time, just give it a little shot on the side. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to peel this tape off now, and you can see the clean outer stanchion line there. That's important to me because it's facing outside, the very first thing on the barge slip ramp section. Notice the little bit of overspray there. That's no worry. See, don't worry, like, don't sweat that kind of stuff when you cut pieces in with an airbrush. That can be fixed instantaneously with an umber wash. That'll just blend the umber or the soon-to-be other gray here into that gray, and you put an umber wash, oil wash, which is probably what I'll do with this upper rail and this lower beam. That'll all disappear, and it'll blend in and work nicely. See the H-column, how the umber is retained within, kind of? And you get that shadow. See, a little bit of overspray gets in there, but that's the light, right? That's what you want. That's what gives it that 3D look. Okay? Okay, so we're finished spraying the JN Gray XF12. Okay? On all the stanchions and the little plates that join the planks together, even some of the nuts I hit there. Okay, and you'll notice all the overspray, right? See how there's overspray in places? Well, that's all going to go away eventually on the final layer or subsequent layers that we cut in. We make all that work in our favor. It's going to come out as just variations in the wood and so on, but we don't worry about that on the early stage, even though it might shock some of you. So now I'm going to take gray-green IJN XF76, and it's water thin, 5% pigment, 10 tops, 90%, 95 IPA. See that? See how thin that is? Okay, so now we're going to go at the wood now. And I'll show you how thin this is, see? Okay. And we're just going to start blending in a little bit. This is almost like a spray wash. It'll look really wet when it goes on, but when it dries, it'll leave a fade. And when this is all faded down, we're going to revive it with an oil wash or an oil wipe. So I'm going to go over all my woodwork here. See, even already that fixes that, see? And where's another one? Let's have a look at these nuts down here. See how that's starting to get a little bit of a weathered fade. And because there's a lot of IPA content in here, it'll hit and reactivate some of that umber. And what's in the umber? A little bit of red, right? So that'll bleed into things. That's how you get that look that you can't achieve with the methodical application with a traditional brush. Like, it's just not easy to reproduce that. The actual air does a lot of it for you, and the isopropyl. Okay, so now we've basically, it was the raw umber base coat, then the JN gray for the upright stanchions, right, and the little brackets, and then the very thin gray-green, very thin over the whole wood, see? So we're getting there. So now I'm going to add just a tiny little bit of rust, linoleum deck brown. This is 10-15% pigment, 85 IPA roughly. Probably too heavy. Probably not enough IPA, but we'll try it out and we'll just have a look. And you can see, yeah, that'll be okay, I guess. So what we're going to do is we're just going to work in a little bit on these brackets here. See? Okay. Because remember that the final washes, whether it's wet on wet or oil washes, are just going to knock all of that down. Okay. And I'm not even sure if I'm going to put oil. I'm going to try wet on wet first. I might be able to do the whole, like all the railing, the complete job with just water-based acrylics. I mean, when I say water-based acrylic, I mean Tamiya as well, because you can mix Tamiya with water. It works just as well with water, especially if you're using a brush. Like, I mean, for washes, but not for painting parts. I don't usually use Tamiya because it just cuts through. It's self-defeating because it cuts through its own layers. But with an airbrush, it's just beautiful. Okay, there's a little hints of rust there. That's enough. A little bit on top there. Okay, so we've applied the rust, right? Remember? Okay, so let's just summarize quick. So JN gray for the upright post, which was, 50-50 pigment IPA, right? You're going to find with Tamiya paint, don't be afraid to thin it. Thin, thin, thin. I keep preaching this, but if I can just get people to go thin and then add pigment, you're going to save way more paint and you're going to get way better results. Everybody mixes their paint way too thick. I've watched every YouTube video that I see, almost every YouTube video where I see them painting. The paint's too heavy, it's just too heavy. So let's get it thin and understand layers if you want to really master painting. Okay, there's just a few tricks. Take your time and build up the layers, Anyway, okay, so now we've, so it was raw umber, right? Tamiya black 50-50 and brown. Make your own raw umber, black and brown. You can never go wrong. Just 50-50 color. It'll be dark brown. Okay, let's just call it dark brown. So, okay, so that gets all painted. The railings. Then we did these uprights, which was JN gray. It has a kind of greeny blue sort of, right? And then what did we do? We had overspray all over it, right? A lot of it's going away now, isn't it? Okay. Now, then we put the little rust on after we sprayed on the wash of gray-green, right? If you've been following. Now we have this deck tan, which is a little bit heavier. Okay. So we're going to paint some deck tan on here. Watch what happens. So the upper railing, because we're going to leave these bottom ones darker. Okay, so these are all painted up now. You can see the bottom beam is a little bit darker. I mean, I could live with that, you know, like as is, just an acrylic. It's all airbrush work, but I think I want to just put a little bit of a wash, a raw umber wash on the bottom beam, just to give it a little more of a brown sort of umbery hint, even though it's very much umber underneath all these layers. It'll help give a little more of continuity with the colors, I think, tie them in. And the nice thing about oils, which acrylics cannot lay claim to, is they're transparent, right? Acrylic paint is opaque. No matter how much you thin it, it's still going to have that opaque finish. It's not a true transparent paint like oil is. So that's the beauty of oils in combination with acrylics. You can have the best of both worlds. And in this case, I'm just going to use some of this raw umber Winsor Newton. And rather than leach oil out of it, I'm just going to add some thinner to it, which will pretty much help the paint dry quite quickly, actually, probably in a day or two. But I won't flat coat these railings probably for, you know, 3 or 4 days, maybe even a week. But so let's start with this little guy here. Let's just see what that looks like. Yeah, that works. Yeah, I can live with that. See how that adds to the almost that creosote darker look. And because it's transparent, even if you get it up onto things, you know, it sort of blends away nice if you just play around with it. Yeah, I really like that. That'll finish them up. You can even run them on the top there too. Let's just try it. See, it's transparent, right? So it's not going to really change the color much. It's just going to help the grain pop a bit more. Okay?